Can you solve all these chemical reactions questions? Wood fire? Good job. Your answer chemical works well here. Ice melting? Nice work. You chose physical change and it is correct. Frying an egg. Clear logic. Your choice chemical change is sound and 100% true. A chemical equation. Valid point represents a chemical reaction is true. All phase changes are. Correct. Physical changes is the right answer. Absorb thermal energy. Solid response. Endothermic reactions is a valid choice. Phi is the dash for iron. Great thinking. Chemical symbol is the right choice. During a chemical change. Nice selection. Something new is made is the correct and valid answer. Rusting is a dash change. Bravo, chemical is the answer. Exothermic reactions dash. Excellent. Release energy is a brilliant choice. Rusting is a dash process. Well picked. Chemical is the correct answer. Ca3 represents a chemical. On track. Formula is the correct answer. In a chemical reaction dash. Nicely done. Atoms rearrange is a solid answer. Speed up chemical reactions. Well reasoned. Catalysts is the correct choice. What kind of energy is food? Smart move. Chemical energy is an accurate answer. Which is a chemical property? Correct response. Reactivity is the most accurate answer. Temperature decreases around. Strong choice. Endothermic reactions is the right answer. Example for chemical property. Perfect. Combustion is the correct choice. A skeleton equation is a dash. You're right. An unbalanced chemical equation is the correct answer. Anything with mass and volume. Exactly. Matter makes sense, and it is right choice. Reaction that releases energy. You got it. Your choice exothermic is right. Flammability is an example of. Well done. Chemical property is the right choice. Chemical bonds form when atoms. Good thinking. Transfer or share electrons is the right answer. A chemical reaction occurs when you chose O2 forms O3, and it is correct. Co is the chemical formula for. Right again, carbon monoxide is a valid answer. A compound is held together by. Smart pick. Chemical bonds is the correct choice. Rate of chemical reaction means. Excellent choice. Speed of reaction is the right answer. Burning paper is an example of a. Great job. Chemical reaction is the accurate answer. In a balanced chemical equation. Sharp thinking. Atoms are conserved is the right choice. Present before chemical reaction. Right choice. Reactant is the best answer. What is an example of a chemical? Perfect. Coke and Mentos is the correct choice. Scrambling eggs is an example of. Valid point. A chemical change is true. What is an example of a property? Good job. Your answer flammability works well here.
Change in smell is an example of. Great job. Chemical sign is the accurate answer.
Chemical reactions are either dash.
You're right. Endothermic and exothermic is the correct answer.
In a chemical reaction, mass will. Excellent. Stay the same is a brilliant choice.
Chemical formula of lime water is. Well reasoned. Ca2 is the correct choice.
Who reacts in a chemical reaction?
Solid response. Electrons is a valid choice. On right side of chemical equation. Smart move. Products is an accurate answer, which describes a chemical change. Great thinking. A banana rotting is the right choice. What changes in a nuclear reaction? Sharp thinking. Nuclear structure is the right choice. In a chemical reaction, we start with. Right again. Reactants is a valid answer. A chemical equation describes a dash. Clear logic. Your choice reaction is sound and 100% true. The energy needed to start a reaction. Well picked. Activation energy is the correct answer. A chemical equation represents with. Good thinking. Symbols and formulas is the right answer. A chemical reaction that absorbs heat. Nicely done. Endothermic is a solid answer. Substance present after a reaction. Smart pick. Product is the correct choice. In chemical reactions, atoms are dash. Exactly. Rearranged makes sense, and it is right choice. A reaction where energy is absorbed is. Strong choice. Endothermic is the right answer. Unexpected color change is a sign of a. Nice work. You chose chemical change and it is correct. What is the chemical formula for water? You got it. Your choice H2 is right. Dash hold atoms together in a molecule. Well done. Chemical bonds is the right choice. A constant input of energy is needed in. Excellent choice. Endothermic reactions is the right answer. Exothermic reactions are reactions that. Correct. Release heat is the right answer. The chemical formula of lead sulfate is. Correct response. PePSO4 is the most accurate answer. Combustion reactions will always involve. Nice selection. Oxygen and heat energy is the correct and valid answer. In a chemical change, energy can be dash. You chose neither created nor destroyed. And it is correct. What is a chemical change also known as? Right choice. Chemical reaction is the best answer. Slows down a chemical reaction. Bravo. Inhibitor is the answer. Chemical reactions create and break down. On track. Chemical bonds is the correct answer. Ending materials in a chemical reaction. Great job. Products is the accurate answer. A solid produced by a chemical reaction. Smart pick. Precipitate is the correct choice, represented by a unique chemical symbol. Correct. Elements is the right answer. Help reactions occur at body temperature. You chose enzymes, and it is correct. Chemical reactions happen when molecules. Right choice. Collide into one another is the best answer. Stretching a rubber band is an example of. Bravo. Physical is the answer. Each dash contains only one type of atom. Well done. Element is the right choice. What does Ac mean in a chemical reaction? Great thinking. Aqueous is the right choice. A larger surface area will dash reactions. Clear logic. Your choice speed up is sound and 100% true. Getting a haircut is an example of a dash. You're right. Physical change is the correct answer. Which happens during a chemical reaction? Exactly. Atoms rearrange makes sense, and it is right choice. Elements in the same period have the dash. Nice selection. Same number energy levels is the correct and valid answer. Which chemical is classified as an enzyme? Right again. Protease is a valid answer. Choose the one that is a chemical property. Correct response. Reactivity with water is the most accurate answer. A chemical reaction could be identified by. Excellent. Bubbles being produced is a brilliant choice. Starting substance in a chemical reaction. Good job. Your answer reactant works well here. The color of a substance is an example of. Excellent choice. Physical property is the right answer. Burning and rusting are both examples of a. Strong choice. Chemical change is the right answer. How do enzymes speed up chemical reactions? Good thinking. Lower the activation energy is the right answer. The chemical formula of magnesium oxide is? Sharp thinking. MAGO is the right choice. Phase change in state of matter is a. Nicely done. Physical change is a solid answer. The chemical formula for aluminium sulfate. Nice work. You chose Altsua, and it is correct. A substance that undergoes a chemical change. Smart move. Reactant is an accurate answer. Something that speeds up a chemical reaction. Well picked. Catalyst is the correct answer. When chemical bonds break, what do atoms do? Well reasoned. Rearrange is the correct choice. A positively or negatively charged particle. You got it? Your choice sign is right. Chemical reactions are also known as chemical. On track. Changes is the correct answer. A chemical equation is composed of two parts. Valid point. Reactants and products is true. A new material formed in a chemical reaction. Perfect. Product is the correct choice. The arrow in a chemical reaction is known as. Solid response. Yield produce is a valid choice. Characteristics used to describe a substance.
Solid response. Properties is a valid choice.
Every chemical reaction involves a change in. Good job. Your answer energy works well here. The speed at which a chemical reaction occurs.
Right again. Rate is a valid answer.
What causes pennies to become brown and dull? Well reasoned. Oxidation is the correct choice.
A baseball held by a pitcher has dash energy.
Correct response. Potential is the most accurate answer. The dash of a molecule store chemical energy. Nice work. You chose bonds and it is correct. New substance produced by a chemical reaction.
Well picked. Product is the correct answer.
A chemical dash is a representation of atoms. Correct. Formula is the right answer.
The substance made during a chemical reaction.
You got it. Your choice product is right. What happens to atoms in a chemical reaction?
Well done. They are rearranged is the right choice.
What will be the chemical formula for K and N? Perfect. Can is the correct choice. These can only be separated by chemical means. Great job. Compound is the accurate answer. Two or more different elements bonded together. Exactly. Compound makes sense and it is right choice. An unbalanced chemical equation is written in. Good thinking. Skeletal form is the right answer. What remains unchanged in a chemical reaction? Excellent choice. Nuclear structure is the right answer. A fishbowl is an example of a dash system. Great thinking. Open is the right choice. Which event always involves a chemical change? You chose burning, and it is correct. How many signs of chemicals reactions we have? You're right. 4 is the correct answer. A number placed in front of a chemical formula. Sharp thinking. Coefficient is the right choice. Which is not an indicator of a chemical change.
Bravo. Shape change is the answer.
How can you tell if a chemical reaction occurs? Right choice. All of these is the best answer. Which chemical reaction switches two ionic bonds? Smart pick. Double replacement is the correct choice. Measure of how fast a chemical reaction occurs. Excellent. Rate of reaction is a brilliant choice. A chemical change is also referred to as a dash. On track. Chemical reaction is the correct answer. 1 or 2 letters used to represent an element. Smart move. Chemical symbol is an accurate answer. NaCl3 is an example of an dash.
Valid point. Chemical formula is true.
In combustion reactions, one of the reactant is. Nice selection. Oxygen is the correct and valid answer. Covalent compounds are dash in their reactions. Strong choice. Slow is the right answer. What shows the ratio of elements in a compound? Nicely done. Chemical formula is a solid answer. Which bath bomb had a greater chemical reaction? Clear logic. Your choice store-bought is sound and 100% true.
Which of these is a result of a physical change?
Bravo. A solution is the answer.
Gases that make a flame bigger are known as dash.
Smart pick. Flammable is the correct choice. What is the byproduct of dehydration reactions? Great thinking. Water is the right choice. What does the arrow in a chemical equation read? Solid response. Reacts to form is a valid choice.
What is one of the signs of a chemical reaction?
You chose formation of a solid, and it is correct. Which molecule is shown in the chemical formula? Strong choice. Diamond is the right answer. Which of these contains only chemical reactions? Well done. Rusting, burning, baking is the right choice. A change in the size, shape, or state of matter. Excellent. Physical change is a brilliant choice. All of the following are chemical changes except. Right choice. Water evaporating is the best answer.
In the chemical formula 3, know the number 2 is A.
You're right. Subscript is the correct answer.
What is the chemical formula for sodium chloride?
Clear logic. Your choice knack is sound and 100% true. Which of the following results in a new substance? Excellent choice. Chemical reactions is the right answer. Which items identify types of chemical reactions? Correct. Decomposition and synthesis is the right answer. Atoms and molecules that interact with each other. Valid point. Reactants is true. Is a substance that speeds up a chemical reaction. On track. Catalyst is the correct answer. What is a substance formed by a chemical reaction? Great job. Product is the accurate answer. Which of the following would be a chemical change? Right again. Burning paper is a valid answer. What are the products of all combustion reactions? Perfect. Carbon dioxide plus water is the correct choice. To balance a chemical equation, we change the dash. Good thinking. Coefficients is the right answer.
The smallest particle of an element that can exist.
Nicely done. Atom is a solid answer. This is formed as a result of a chemical reaction. You got it? Your choice a product is right. Which of the following is not a chemical property? Exactly. Density makes sense and it is right choice.
The chemical formula for tin oxide is written.
Well reasoned. Older is the correct choice. What is the chemical formula for iron oxide? Correct response. Pop is the most accurate answer.
What provides the energy for all living processes? Well picked. Chemical bonds is the correct answer.
What is found on the right of a chemical equation? Smart move. Products is an accurate answer. The energy needed to get a reaction started is the... Nice selection. Activation energy is the correct and valid answer. The correct chemical formula of plaster of Paris is... Good job, your answer, Caso. For 1 but 2 works well here. Which factor does not speed up a chemical reaction? Sharp thinking. Volume is the right choice. More than 2 atoms stuck together is called a dash.
Nice work. You chose molecule and it is correct.
A force of attraction that holds 2 atoms together. Perfect. Chemical bonds is the correct choice. The arrow in a chemical equation means becomes or. Right choice. Yields is the best answer. Dash energy is the energy stored in chemical bonds.
Nice selection. Chemical potential is the correct and valid answer.
New substance that forms during a chemical reaction. Correct. Product is the right answer. Form when metal atoms share their pooled electrons.
You're right. Metallic bond is the correct answer.
Nuclear reactions involve the particles in the dash. Bravo! Nucleus is the answer. The arrow in a chemical equation represents the dash. Well done. Chemical reaction is the right choice. The chemical compound for sodium phosphate would be. Well reasoned. Play 4 is the correct choice. Dash are the substances made by a chemical reaction. Excellent. Products is a brilliant choice. A dash begins and ends with the same type of matter. Clear logic. Your choice physical change is sound and 100% true. Uses symbols and formulas to show chemical reactions. Valid point. Chemical equation is true. Which statement about exothermic reactions is false? Good job. Your answer they take in heat works well here. Increasing the temperature causes reactions to occur. Smart move.
More rapidly is an accurate answer.
A group of atoms join together in a particular way. Exactly. Molecules make sense and it is right choice. Which property is an example of a chemical property? Nicely done. Flammability is a solid answer. All decomposition reactions have how many reactants? You got it. Your choice 1 is right. Which of the following chemical formulas is correct? Well picked. K2s is the correct answer. A change in shape of an object is an example of dash. Good thinking. A physical change is the right answer. Dash describes the number of elements in a compound. Great thinking. Chemical formula is the right choice. An Oreo cookie being crushed is an example of a dash. Correct response. Physical reaction is the most accurate answer. You balance chemical equations by changing the dash. Right again. Coefficient is a valid answer. What is the chemical symbol for the element hydrogen? Nice work. You chose H and it is correct. Reactions that release energy in the form of heat are. On track. Exothermic is the correct answer. The elements that start a chemical equation is called. Solid response. Reactants is a valid choice. Tells how fast a reaction occurs after it has started.
You chose rate of reaction, and it is correct.
occurs when substances react to form a new substance. Excellent choice. Chemical change is the right answer.
The amount of energy in a chemical bond between atoms.
Sharp thinking. Bond energy is the right choice. When a chemical reaction absorbs heat, we call it dash.
Great job. Endothermic is the accurate answer.
What's the chemical formula for two of these molecules?
Strong choice. Arites is the right answer. The two main components of any chemical reaction are smart pick. Reactants and products is the correct choice. What element is represented by the chemical symbol Mg? Great thinking. Magnesium is the right choice. The color that occurs when iron rusts is evidence of a solid response. Chemical reactions is a valid choice. A reaction that involves energy being absorbed is dash. Bravo! Endothermic is the answer.
An interaction that holds atoms or ions together is a...
Well reasoned. Chemical bond is the correct choice. What kind of bond forms between a cation and an anion? You chose ionic bond. And it is correct. In a compound, where is the chemical energy contained? Right choice. Bones is the best answer.
After endothermic and exothermic reactions, matter dash.
Nice work. You chose stays the same and it is correct.
What type of product is formed in oxidation reactions?
On track, an oxide is the correct answer.
What's the easiest way to balance a chemical equation?
Valid point. Trial and error is true. What gas is produced by acid-metal carbonate reactions? Clear logic. Your choice carbon dioxide gas is sound and 100% true. When bonds form in a chemical reaction, energy is dash. Nice selection. Released is the correct and valid answer. A chemical reaction that requires heat. Think inside. Well picked. Endothermic reaction is the correct answer. Which one of these is an example of a chemical change? Smart pick. Forming a polymer is the correct choice.
Which of the following results in a chemical reaction?
Perfect. Burning wood is the correct choice. The right side of the chemical reaction is called dash. Smart move. Products is an accurate answer.
A short way to show a chemical reaction using symbols.
Good thinking. Chemical equation is the right answer.
Chemical reactions that absorb energy are known as dash. Sharp thinking. Endothermic is the right choice.
The minimum energy needed to start a chemical reaction.
You're right. Activation energy is the correct answer. The substance that is produced from a chemical reaction. Strong choice. Product is the right answer.
The starting materials in a chemical reaction are called.
Great job. Reactants is the accurate answer. What is the abbreviated way to show a chemical reaction? Good job. Your answer, a chemical equation, works well here. Which type of chemical reaction is this Mg plus O-MiMe go?
Excellent choice. Synthesis is the right answer.
What happens to the type of matter in a chemical change? Nicely done. It changes is a solid answer. What are the starting substances in a chemical reaction? Correct. Reactants is the right answer. In a chemical reaction, the reactant undergoes. Right again. All of the others is a valid answer.
Substance that exists before a chemical reaction begins.
Well done. Reactant is the right choice. The substances initially involved in a chemical reaction. Excellent. Reactants is a brilliant choice. Where does the energy for a chemical reaction come from? Exactly. Chemical bonds make sense and it is right choice. What are the two major parts of every chemical equation? Correct response. Reactants and products is the most accurate answer. Where do you find the amount of electrons in an element? You got it. Your choice atomic number is right.
What is the opposite of combination synthesis reactions?
Strong choice. Decomposition is the right answer.
How many atoms do you have in the chemical formula 3-ox-2O2?
Exactly. 12 atoms make sense and it is right choice. A substance present after a chemical reaction is called a Nicely done. Product is a solid answer. What is located on the right side of a chemical reaction?
You got it? Your choice products is right.
Which type of chemical reaction starts with one reactant? Excellent choice. Decomposition is the right answer. In a chemical equation, the reactants are written on the... Good thinking. Left side is the right answer. A process in which atoms rearrange to form new substances. Well reasoned. Chemical reaction is the correct choice. What is the right part of a chemical equation called dash? Solid response. Products is a valid choice. Number written below and to the right of a chemical symbol. You're right. Subscript is the correct answer. A starting substance that is part of a chemical reaction. On track. Reactant is the correct answer.
A change in which the reactants and products are different.
Smart move. Chemical change is an accurate answer.
Can be observed without changing the object or matter. Well done. A physical properties is the right choice. The forces that hold different atoms or ions together are.
Great thinking. Chemical bonds is the right choice.
A dash is a number written in front of a chemical formula.
Great job. Coefficient is the accurate answer. Is sugar dissolving in water a chemical or physical change?
Sharp thinking. Physical is the right choice.
Sulfuric acid has the chemical formula. Nice selection. H2SO4 is the correct and valid answer.
During a chemical reaction, atoms cannot be dash or dash. Bravo. Created or destroyed is the answer. Substances that enter into a chemical reaction are called.
Correct. Reactants is the right answer.
The forces that hold atoms or ions together in a compound.
Well picked. Chemical bond is the correct answer.
Which of the below is not evidence of a chemical reaction?
Smart pick. Changing physical form is the correct choice. How many iron are in the following chemical formula? 2-pheto-3. Correct response. 4 is the most accurate answer.
Increased surface area dash the rate of chemical reactions.
Right choice. Increases is the best answer. A dash is a symbolic representation of a chemical reaction. Perfect. Chemical equation is the correct choice. Which subatomic particle participates in chemical bonding? Valid point. Electrons is true. What information do you need to write a chemical equation? Good job. Your answer, all choices, works well here. A solid that is produced as a result of a chemical reaction. Excellent. Precipitate is a brilliant choice.
What is the method of balancing a chemical equation called?
Clear logic. Your choice trial and error method is sound and 100% true. What is the name of the element with the chemical symbols? You chose sulfur, and it is correct.
In a chemical equation, what do the coefficients represent?
Right again. Number of molecules is a valid answer. Which type of reaction absorbs energy from the environment? Nice work. You chose endothermic reaction, and it is correct. To balance a chemical equation, you should change only the... Right again. Coefficients is a valid answer.
The Statue of Liberty turning green is an example of a dash.
You got it? Your choice chemical change is right. Chemical equations must be balanced because the law of dash. Great thinking. Conservation of mass is the right choice. Catalyst that speeds up chemical reactions in living cells? Smart pick. Enzyme is the correct choice.
Number placed in front of a chemical formula in an equation.
Nice work. You chose coefficient and it is correct. Which of these is not a sign a chemical change has occurred? Excellent choice. Cutting material is the right answer. This is certain proof that a chemical reaction has occurred. Nice selection. Change of chemical properties is the correct and valid answer.
A chemical reaction in which heat energy is released is dash.
Strong choice. Exothermic is the right answer.
Substances that are formed as a result of a chemical change.
Bravo. Products is the answer. Atoms in the reactants are the same as atoms in the products.
Smart move. Balanced equation is an accurate answer. A substance that is formed or created in a chemical reaction.
Exactly. Product makes sense and it is right choice.
A substance that speeds up chemical reactions is called dash. Clear logic. Your choice A catalyst is sound and 100% true. A change in matter that produces one or more new substances. Valid point. Chemical change is true. A larger number found in front of a chemical formula is a. You chose coefficient, and it is correct. How many types of chemical reactions did you learn in class?
Correct response. 3 is the most accurate answer.
The starting substance in a chemical reaction is called dash.
Good thinking. Reactant is the right answer.
A chemical process where the atom loses an electron or more. Right choice. Oxidation process is the best answer. Which factor will not change the rate of a chemical reaction? Correct. Light intensity is the right answer.
How does a temperature increase affect the rate of reactions?
Well reasoned. Speeds it up is the correct choice. A chemical reaction is the process of converting dash to dash. Sharp thinking. Reactants, products is the right choice. A change in matter that produces a new substance is called air.
Excellent. Chemical reaction is a brilliant choice.
Which is the correct chemical formula of iron chloride? Good job. Your answer, so he broke down, works well here. Matter can go through changes. What are these changes called? Well done. Physical and chemical changes is the right choice.
The letters and numbers showing the types or groups of atoms.
Solid response. Chemical formula is a valid choice.
The arrow in a chemical reaction is also called the dash sign.
Great job. Yield is the accurate answer. A solid that forms from a solution during a chemical reaction. Perfect. Precipitate is the correct choice. A metal and a non-metal will form which kind of chemical bond? You're right. Ionic bond is the correct answer. What is a type of catalyst that speeds up a chemical reaction? Well picked. Enzyme is the correct answer. During a chemical reaction, atoms dash to form new substances. Nicely done. Rearrange is a solid answer. What does the arrow in the middle of a chemical equation mean? On track. Yields is the correct answer. Anything on the right of the arrow in a chemical equation is a... Right again. Product is a valid answer. What chemical reaction occurs in elephant toothpaste formation? You chose decomposition of hydrogen peroxide, and it is correct.
Which is the substance produced by a chemical reaction called?
Right choice. Product is the best answer. Endothermic reactions are accompanied by a dash in temperature. On track. Decrease is the correct answer. What is the correct chemical name for the ionic compound Phthalene 2? Good job. Your answer, iron nitride, works well here. Which of the reactions is used in black and white photography? Smart move. Decomposition reaction is an accurate answer. A number written in front of a chemical formula is called A. Well reasoned. Coefficient is the correct choice. Complete the sentence. During a chemical reaction, atoms dash. Bravo. Get rearranged is the answer. Which of the following would not speed up a chemical reaction? Solid response. Diluting the acid is a valid choice. When a dash takes place, an entirely new substance is created. Correct response. Chemical change is the most accurate answer. A description of a reaction using symbols and chemical formulas. Valid point. Chemical equation is true.
Starting substances in a chemical reaction.
Nice selection. Reactants is the correct and valid answer. In a chemical reaction dash, substances are formed with new dash. Well picked. New end properties is the correct answer. A new material formed in a chemical reaction is called a dash.
Sharp thinking. Product is the right choice.
Catalysts permit reactions to proceed along a dash energy path.
Nicely done. Lower is a solid answer.
When two or more substances react to form a new product, it is a... Perfect. Chemical reaction is the correct choice.
Which of the following is not an indicator of chemical changes?
Great job. Dissolving is the accurate answer. A representation of a chemical reaction by symbols and numbers. Correct. Chemical equation is the right answer. In a chemical reaction or a chemical process, arrow mark is used. Great thinking. Between reactants and products is the right choice.
Substance that take part in a chemical reaction is called a dash.
Excellent. Reactant is a brilliant choice. Cutting your hair and phase change are an example of dash change.
Clear logic. Your choice physical is sound and 100% true. A substance or molecule that participates in a chemical reaction.
Good thinking. Reactant is the right answer.
What is the energy required to start a chemical reaction called?
You got it? Your choice activation energy is right.
What are the substances that are created by a chemical reaction? Smart pick. Products is the correct choice. What is considered a starting ingredient in a chemical reaction? Nice work. You chose reactant and it is correct.
Chemical reactions that give off heat are called dash reactions.
Excellent choice. Exothermic is the right answer. Which of the following is not a way to stress a chemical system? Well done. Time is the right choice. A substance that undergoes a changes in a chemical reaction dash. Strong choice. Reactant is the right answer. A minimum amount of energy required to start a chemical reaction. You're right. Activation energy is the correct answer. The collisions which bring about a chemical reaction are called.
Exactly. Effective collisions make sense, and it is right choice.
How you will get all these quiz questions in PDF books format?
You're right. Contact Narayan Changder is the correct answer.